My wedding day turned into a heartbreaking battle. I had to choose between love and family. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. My hands trembled as I adjusted my veil, staring through the veil of chaos. The venue was exquisite, filled with flowers that smelled like dreams, yet the air was thick with unsaid words. I could feel the tension in my chest, tight as a noose. Mom had whispered warnings all week. "He's not the one," she said, her voice quaking with worry. I wanted to scream that she didn't know him like I did. But the truth was more unsettling than I dared to admit. He was everything I thought I wanted: funny, charming, with eyes that danced like stars. But family never approved. They saw shadows where I saw light. As I prepared for the I-dos, a shadow lurked at the edge of my heart, whispering doubts. My best friend Sarah rushed to my side, her eyes wide and frantic. "You okay?" she asked, and I could see the worry etched on her face. It only took a glance outside to feel the storm brewing. Black clouds rolled in, mirroring the tempest inside me. When I stepped into the sunlit garden, everything faded into a blur. Flowers were splashed with vivid colors, but they seemed to tremble under the weight of my decision. I saw him standing there, waiting, lost in thoughts that mirrored my own. My heart raced, but so did the blares of jealousy from the family in attendance. They scrutinized my every move. Suddenly, the pastor's voice broke through my whirlwind of emotions, echoing in my ears. "Do you, Sarah, take this man?" But just then, I heard the distant sound of sirens, a chilling reminder of the feud simmering beneath the surface. The crowd gasped as I faltered, gripping the bouquet as if it could anchor me. Not like this, I thought, my heart caught between love and family loyalty. Could I really say I do? With everyone watching, a weight of their eyes, heavy pulse quickened. What if I'm making a mistake? The silence stretched, heavy and pregnant with tension, and then, a sudden crash. Glass shattered behind me. The crowd gasped again, and I turned, my heart pounding painfully against my ribs. What was happening? My mind raced. Was it too late to turn back? Could love win over family? Or was I standing on a precipice, about to plunge into heartbreak? The rawness of the situation stole my breath. I felt pulled in every direction, and as the world around me warred, I realized I was the one who had to make the final call. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the sound of shattered glass echoed in the garden, a conflicted silence consumed me. My heart raced, my breathing quickened. I turned to see what had caused the disruption, my veil fluttering ominously in the sudden gust of wind, mingling with the scent of damp earth and impending rain. A mix of fear and dread gripped my throat, constricting my voice. I wanted to scream, to demand a moment of clarity in the chaos, but instead, I stood frozen at the altar, a statue caught in an emotional downpour. In that moment, my father approached, his face a mask of concern. "Sarah, let's step aside for a moment," he said, his voice stern yet shaky. I could see the storm reflected in his eyes, not just the impending rain but the turmoil I felt churning within. "Dad, I can't, not now," I stammered, my pulse thrumming in my ears, drowning out the voices of the crowd. Each gaze felt like a heavy weight, pressing down on me, urging me to make a decision I wasn't ready to confront. The man beside me, my fiancé, looked perplexed, uncertainty flaring in his eyes. "Sarah?" he called out, but the desperate look on his face made it harder to both meet his gaze and turn to my father. I was wedged between two worlds, two desires, and the suffocating silence around me echoed the tumult in my heart. Just then, a warm hand brushed against my arm. It was Sarah, my best friend. Her presence was a balm on my fraying nerves. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, reminding me of the late-night conversations under stars where dreams flowed freely, untouched by the rigid expectations of family. "You have a choice. The sincerity in her voice blossomed like hope unexpectedly bursting through the clouds. I looked back at the gathering, feeling the weight of not just my family, but also the love in his eyes, the affection that had grown between us like a delicate, fragile vine. But vines can choke when they become too entwined. The small moments of courage I had shared with him resurfaced: long walks in the park, spontaneous road trips, quiet nights filled with laughter that felt like balm on my soul. Was I willing to let all of that slip through my fingers? Could I break the chains forged by family expectations? As I stood there, wrestling with my heart and the gravity of my family's legacy, I caught a glimpse of my mother's tear-streaked face. Her silent plea pierced through the noise, reminding me of the life she'd constructed from her choices shaped by the opinions of others. Had I already made my choice by being born into this family, or was love truly worth risking the foundation it was built upon? Then the wind picked up, carrying the taste of rain and chaos, and it transformed into a downpour, mercilessly soaking our wedding day dreams. Gasps rang out as guests scrambled for cover. I felt the chaos mirroring the storm inside me. It propelled me forward, and yet, it pushed me back just as fiercely. "Your heart has always known, Sarah," Sarah urged me again, looking deep into my eyes, her own brimming with unshed tears of understanding. I could sense the vulnerability in her. She had been my guide through the labyrinth of emotions. "You're not just about making them happy. You deserve to choose." At that moment, something shifted. I realized perhaps love needed to be protected, cultivated, not just celebrated on a day defined by tradition. I could see him still lingering there, hope gleaming in his eyes. The crack in my heart felt raw, but it also felt alive just as I opened my mouth to speak, to articulate the truth that had danced on the tip of my tongue. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating our faces. It seemed as if the heavens themselves demanded a choice, as nature clashed in all its fury. The power surged through me, electricity woven with uncertainty. Then came the sound of someone shouting, forcing my attention back to the gathering crowd. "Look over there," one of the guests yelled, pointing towards the entrance. I turned and saw a figure rushing toward us, face obscured by rain but unmistakably determined. A tidal wave of mixed emotions washed over me. With every step, it felt like time slowed, and my heart clenched painfully in anticipation of a revelation that could shatter everything I thought I knew. "Who is that?" I breathed, feeling an inexplicable sense of dread at what it might mean. Would this new arrival bring clarity, or would it add fuel to the flame already threatening to consume my heart? I stood balanced at the edge of my decision, just as torrential rains blurred the faces of those I loved and the winds howled their disdain for indecision. Rain fell in sheets, soaking the world around us as I stood frozen, face to face with uncertainty. The stranger drew closer, their silhouette sharp against the storm, and as they stepped into the puddles, every splash felt like a drumbeat of impending revelation. My heart raced, grappling with the fear that if I couldn't decipher my own feelings, how could I possibly navigate this chaos? "Who is that?" My fiancé echoed my thoughts, stepping closer, his brow furrowed and confusion coloring his tone. I turned toward him, but the trembling in his hands spoke of anxiety, and I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. I didn't want to shatter his dreams, much less on a day meant to unite us. But an unseen force compelled my gaze back to the figure. "Is it someone from the past?" Sarah whispered, her hand still resting gently on my arm, anchoring my spiraling thoughts. I caught a glimpse of the newcomer's face, familiar, yet blurred in the downpour. My breath caught in my throat as realization gripped me like a vice. My heart sank. It was Mark, an old flame, a friendship once woven into the fabric of my youth, now resurrected by circumstance. The world around us had all but stopped. The only thing manifesting was the tension tightly woven in the air, mixed with rain whose intensity matched our turmoil. He was a specter of memories that I had thought I buried, yet here he stood. The weight of years and emotions weighed heavily upon my chest at the sight of him. What could he possibly want? "I had to come," Mark shouted above the roar of the rain, determination etched on his face, his eyes glancing between me and the altar. "Sarah, I need you to hear me out, just for a moment." I could feel the collective gaze of our guests, their confusion mingled with intrigue. At that moment, They were not merely spectators. They were witnesses to the unraveling of my life. My worlds had collided with thunderous urgency, and in that brief moment of clamoring chaos, it threatened to drown my heart. My father's voice broke through the storm, an anchor amidst the tempest. "This is inappropriate. We're in the middle of a wedding. You don't belong here." His words were laced with anger, an instinct to protect the family name that urged me to retreat. Yet, every syllable only strengthened the pull towards Mark, reigniting the embers of the choices I regretted not pursuing. "Dad, wait." I cried, the urgency in my tone cutting through the haze of resentment and disappointment. I needed clarity now more than ever, and surprisingly, the revelation that Mark was here might be the very thing that would either cast light on my shadowed path or plunge me deeper into despair. "Let him speak," Sarah urged, her fierce belief in my autonomy mingling with a steadfast loyalty. I looked at her, knowing how much she understood the complexities of love and the vastness of longing that could stretch beyond confines of expectation. It was as if she believed I hadn't just made mistakes, I had also made choices that mattered, ones that would lead me to this very moment. Mark took a breath, seeming to collapse my trepidations into dust. "You're in a storm, Sarah, but your heart knows the way through it," he said, his voice breaking slightly, filled with an anguish that mirrored my own. "I wasn't brave enough to tell you then, but I never stopped loving you. I always thought you were meant to be more than just a part of a conventional life." The truth of his words crashed over me like another wave, filling me with warmth and dissonance. Did he know? Did he sense the struggles I faced in my pursuit of happiness? Was he here to fuel the fire of conflict or offer me refuge from the chaos within? The tension became tangible, thickening the air as I felt my foundation trembling. It threatened to shift not just the sands of my family values, but also the fragile bond one shared with my fiancé at the altar, who stood bewildered and hurt. My heart raced, caught in a whirlwind of emotions, strangulated by the weight of choices never fully voiced. "Sarah, you need to decide," my fiancé finally spoke, his voice low, a mixture of desperation and resignation. "This isn't just about us anymore. You're being pulled between two lives, one that's safe and predictable, and one that's filled with unknowns." Tears welled in my eyes, overwhelmed by such a painful truth. My faith in love felt both fragile and unbreakable, teetering on the precipice of my own desires. A flood of hurt welled within me, squeezing my heart painfully, and through the chaos, a flicker of clarity emerged amidst the confusion. Love was worth the struggle, but it had to be real, not forged by expectation. "Mark," I started, but the words failed to form. Twisted emotions intertwining with the rain as it pooled around my feet. Suddenly, everything changed. A blinding flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the crowd, and for a moment, I saw my mother's anxious form melding with my father's rigid anger. Fear gripped my heart, and with it, the realization swelled within me like the storm above. I had to choose between the expectation of my family and the echoes of my past. But as a chill ran down my spine, my mind spun with uncertainty. What if I chose wrong, and everything I had hoped for crumbled like the glass that shattered moments ago? The skies darkened, and with one last anguished look at Mark and the role he played in the symphony of my heart, I felt my resolve slip. A whisper of disbelief loomed over the crowd, and just when I thought I could gather my thoughts to finally speak, the heavens unleashed its fury. The torrential rain poured down, petulant and unforgiving, as I felt the enormity of my choice elaborating upon me. Before I could utter another word, a chilling scream pierced the downpour, echoed by a gasp from the crowd. I turned, bracing myself for whatever tempest now threatened to engulf us, the very foundation of my life teetering against the maelstrom outside and within. The scream shattered the tense atmosphere, pulling my gaze away from Mark and returned to the chaos that was unfolding among the guests. My heart raced as I caught sight of Sarah, her face drained of color, eyes wide with shock as she pointed into the distance. I followed her line of sight to find my grandmother, an anchor in my life, as she collapsed onto the wet grass, the world around her slipping into hazy chaos. "Grams!" I shouted, instinctively moving away from Mark towards her. Panic coursed through me as I knelt beside her, my heart pounding in sync with the torrential downpour. The rain poured down, mingling with my tears, flowing uncontrollably as I cradled her face in my hands. "Please, stay with me." The air filled with urgency as the guests began to surge forward, desperation evident in their faces. Instinct driven by love surged through me, overpowering the confusion of the moment. My mother was there, her face drawn tight with anguish, trying to offer comfort and stability in an ocean of fear. The embarrassment of the moment, the wedding, the drama evaporated. My sole focus shifted into the need to protect the people I loved, those who meant everything to me. "Someone call an ambulance." My mother yelled, her voice cutting through the cacophony of the rain and gasps around us. Mark stood a few paces away, frozen in place, guilt and helplessness etched on his features. In his eyes, I saw a flicker of understanding and acknowledgement that what was unfolding transcended our tangled emotions and spoke to the fragility of life itself. I cradled my grandmother's head, worrying over her as she lay still, a trickle of blood running from her temple. "Grams, can you hear me? Please stay with me." I felt the weight of the moment drown me in a depth of despair I had never encountered before. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing the familiar warmth and love that had raised me from childhood. "Sarah," she whispered weakly, her voice fragile, but clear as the downpour. "My sweet girl." Her hand trembled as she gripped mine, grounding me amidst the storm. "Grams, just hold on. Help is coming," I assured her, fighting the rising tide of fear and the gnawing uncertainty gnashing at my heart. What if this was a prelude to something worse? What if I lost her? The thought sent a fresh wave of desperation crashing over me. My fiancé knelt by my side, his eyes glistening with unshed tears as he reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. In that moment, it was not the love we had built that mattered, but the shared strength in the face of loss. "We'll get through this together," he whispered, even as we both felt the weight of our reality pressed down upon us. "Take care of her first." A part of me wanted to shatter under the pressure of the day, and another part longed for the unfiltered depths of my heart, the one that ached for clarity, but was too consumed with grief. As I glanced back at Mark, I noticed a shift. He was disconnected yet engaged, poised to offer help, but not wanting to intrude. Suddenly, I was struck by the vastness of our tangled lives, love, loss, and the relentless struggle between them. As the wailing sirens drew closer, an ethereal hush descended upon the chaos, the torrential rain suddenly sounding like a soft lullaby against the backdrop of my grandmother's labored breaths. Time felt suspended. The world around us lived in suspended animation, and I was acutely aware of my family gathering together in a circle, sudden unity born from fear and love. "Please, Grams, stay with me," I repeated, choking on the lump in my throat as warmth spread from her hand, a lifeline in the turbulent storm that surrounded us. "I need you to tell me everything is going to be okay." Through the haze of fear and uncertainty, a subtle hope flickered within me, a focus on the present filled with memories of laughter, stories passed between generations, the unconditional love that had seen me through countless storms. I needed to believe she would be all right. Mark approached slowly, kneeling beside us, and with a gentle touch, he reached for my grandmother's other hand. "You were always the bright light in our lives, Mrs. H., and you need to get back to being that light." His voice held no hint of romantic past, only a reverence for her spirit. Yet it felt as if he was also reaching for me, seeking to anchor us both amidst the turbulency, a silent admission that we could rise above the wreckage of our hearts. The wail of approaching sirens intensified, the promise of help surging like a lifeline, but I'd be lying if I said I felt stronger. In truth, the weight of love, the push and pull of wanting connection, yet fearing loss, had knotted itself even tighter around my heart. As the paramedics rushed to attend to my grandmother, I pulled away, a sudden urgency rising within me to face whatever lay ahead. I looked at Mark and saw a reflection of my fractured world, and in that moment, clarity began to form through the storm. But clarity was elusive when surrounded by those I cared for most. "Sarah," my fiancé whispered, his voice strained but firm, "whatever happens next, know we'll deal with it together, no matter what." Though fear twisted inside me, something inside felt awakened. The echoes of that promise laid a fragile bridge over the daunting chasm I felt within my heart. As the chaos began to subside with each passing second, and as I turned to face my family, I could feel the storm within me raging, grasping for peace. I longed for understanding, a moment where clarity would strike through the tumult. And just as the clouds above loosened for a brief moment, revealing patches of a hauntingly beautiful twilight, one undeniable truth emerged between my struggles. I would have to navigate this storm, each choice leading me deeper into the heart of love and family, despair and hope. Yet as I looked into the fading light, feeling a warmth spread through the chaos, I knew there would be no tidy conclusions, only the relentless ties of the heart pulling in all directions. And as I felt the beating of my heart and the urgency rise again within, I understood I was standing at the precipice of an uncharted path. The storm raged on, and the realization brushed against my mind like a feather. A choice would soon be looming on the horizon, one that would demand the depths of my heart to unravel the truth of who I truly was, and, ultimately, what I was willing to fight for. As I knelt on the drenched grass, the paramedics worked diligently to assess my grandmother's condition, but all I could hear was the frenzied rhythm of my heartbeat echoing in my ears, a steady reminder that time was slipping away. The world faded into background noise. All that mattered was the frail figure of my grandmother lying before me, her breath a painful, fragile whisper. Everything felt surreal. The laughter and joy of the wedding a stark contrast to the somber reality of the unfolding drama. Guests stood helplessly, a collective anxiety palpable in the air, a magnetic murmur of worry coursing amongst them. I felt like a thorn in a blooming garden, a bruise in the artistry of celebration. Mark's presence remained a comfort beside me, yet I sensed a distance in his demeanor, a dissonance that echoed my own inner chaos. Although he leaned in to help, I could feel the shadows of our unresolved conflict hovering between us. After all, how could he claim a place in my heart in the face of such a profound crisis? And yet, as I watched him throw himself into action, assisting the medics with such compassion, a flicker of admiration ignited within the depths of my turmoil. Then, I heard my mother's voice splitting the air again, sharp and urgent, calling me to step aside. Her pain was tangible, reflected in her tear-filled eyes, and as I stood back to let the professionals work, I could feel another truth seep into the cracks of my heart. My family's collective grief was a mirror of my own. "We need to get her stabilized," one of the paramedics instructed, focusing on my grandmother's vitals, which ticked away like a clock counting down to an unknown fate. I felt lost in a sea of fear, longing for the comforting presence of her gentle voice filled with wisdom, telling me it would all be all right. But the looming uncertainties gnawed at my resolve, unearthing a pit of anxiety that grew heavier with each passing minute. My mother's hands trembled at her side, so different from the woman who had held me steady throughout every storm. "Sarah, you know she's a fighter," she said, her voice cracking. "Your Grams has been through so much, she will get through this." There was a distinct mixture of hope and dread in her voice, and I could sense the unspoken question hanging in the air. What if this time she didn't? "I don't want to lose her," I whispered, feeling the tears spill down my cheeks. I didn't care whose sai was raw, an open wound, aching for the comfort of my grandmother's love. "Neither do I," my mother responded, emotion choked in her throat. A flicker of anger flashed in her eyes at the world, the chaos, but most of all, at the fragility of life. In that moment, I understood the storm affecting me was a storm affecting us all. Mark shifted beside me, his hand brushing against mine, grounding me like an anchor in turbulent seas. I felt an urge to reach for those conflicting emotions, the love I felt for him, and the realization of what had created that love. It danced on the edge of my awareness, like a faint ember hidden under ash, and amidst the noise, a moment of sudden clarity cut through the haze. It wasn't just about my grandmother, it was about the intricate tapestry of our lives, each thread woven together with love and connection, binding us in a way that transcended the dark moments. I glanced into Mark's eyes, and for the first time, I saw not just a partner, but an ally, fellow traveler through the storm. The ambulance doors swung shut, and the world outside felt muted. It was in those moments of waiting, of uncertainty, that the depth of my family challenges crystallized alongside the choice that demanded I embrace who I truly was in the midst of all this. Sarah, my mother looked at me, attempting to center herself. If this is the moment we need to pull together, you must promise me that you will make the right choice for our family. Her gaze felt like a weighty chain, anchoring me to the reality of the moment. What is the right choice? My heart fluttered with fear. I wanted to protect my grandmother, fine day. Way to hug the warmth of her spirit into the future, but what if it meant letting something else slip away? What if it meant sacrificing my own future, stranding myself behind in a chase for familial duty? It was then that the sirens blurred into the background, and in the distance, I noticed the faint semblance of a figure emerging through the rain. A shadowy silhouette, rushing toward us with purpose. I squinted through the downpour, my heart suddenly lurching at the sight. Elaine? A voice cried out, a familiar voice, one I never expected to hear again. I blinked rapidly, the raindrops mixing with disbelief, for there stood my estranged father, back from the shadows just as the storm enveloped my life. The weight of my past collided with my present, a devastating reminder of the fractures that had been carved into my family. Dad? The word escaped my lips, a breath caught between shock and resentment, fear and an unrecognizable longing. Everything around me shattered into fragments, and just like that, the simmering conflict within my heart surged anew. Now I would have to confront the deeper rifts, challenge the silence that had woven itself into my family's fabric. All amidst the desperate urgency of my grandmother's fate. The storm raged on, but it was only a new chapter in an epic about to unfold. The rain fell in a relentless rhythm, drumming against the pavement and echoing the turmoil within me. My father stood there, soaked to the bone, his face a mosaic of guilt and desperation that mirrored my own chaos. The years of absence, of unanswered calls and broken promises, hung heavily in the air between us, layers of bitterness coating what should have been a moment of relief. Sarah, he said, his voice cracking like thunder. Yearning for connection, yet steeped in uncertainty. Two had to come. I heard what happened. The space between us felt electric, charged with the possibility of forgiveness, but weighed down by the resentment that had festered for so long. My brain spun. How could he just show up now, when we were teetering on the edge of disaster? My eyes flicked back to my grandmother lying still, her life hanging in fragile balance. You didn't care enough to stay before, I murmured, my voice barely carried by the wind, bitter and worn. It was a weak jab, but the sting released the pressure bubbling beneath my surface. I thought I saw a quiver of pain ripple across his expression, but I couldn't bring myself to care. The past was a shadow I had learned to navigate in his absence, a bitter inheritance I didn't want to revisit. Sarah, please, I know I messed everything up, he pleaded, hands fidgeting at his sides like a man grappling with chains. But I can't lose our family. Not again. Not like this. The sincerity in his voice struck me, but it was dulled by the weight of years spent waiting for him to choose us over whatever darkness had consumed him. He had left us when we needed him, most as if running away could shield us from the storm he had created. I felt the tidal waves of anger and hurt surge, threatening to engulf me at the very thought of mourning my grandmother with him by my side. But then, a flicker of movement caught my attention. It was Mark, stepping cautiously towards us, those familiar eyes scanning my face, searching for answers to unspoken questions. He faced my father with an intensity that reminded me of how fiercely he had fought to support me only moments before. He didn't need to speak. His presence spoke volumes, anchoring me in an unsteady sea. My father started, his voice faltering as he craned his neck towards the hastily parked ambulance. No, I said sharply, the anguish erupting in my throat. You don't get to ask about her like it matters, Dad. Not after everything. Each word cut through the distance like shards of bitter glass, and I wondered whether I was savaging the wound or simply giving voice to the pain. But the gravity of the situation couldn't be overlooked. Just then, a paramedic emerged from the flurry of rain, his expression serious. I stepped forward instinctively, dread pooling in my stomach. We've stabilized her temporarily. She's being transported to the hospital. You'll want to come with us, he said, voice unyielding, dragging the emotional weight back into focus. Can we see her? My mother, whose composure had started to crack, stepped forward like a whisper of hope. The paramedic nodded, but I felt a chill, as though the simple affirmation carried chains of consequence with it. With each passing moment, questions coiled tightly around my heart. Would she know we were there? Would her frail figure flicker back to life amidst her family, or was this final chapter already written in the margins of her journey? The uncertainty gnawed at me, and in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to stand united, not just for her but for all the unresolved threads that tethered us. "Sarah," Mark said softly beside me, his hand brushing against mine again. "No matter what happens next, I'm here for you. I promise." His voice steadied my trembling heart, but as I turned to him, another storm brewed within me, unasked question of who I truly wanted beside me amidst this tempest. I felt my father's gaze upon us, felt the scrapes of judgment and confusion. And it rekindled an old fire. "You think you can come back and pretend to care now?" I struggled to keep my voice low, each syllable dripping with bitter defiance. "You know nothing about being present," but deep down, a flicker of longing coursed through me, battling against the anger. I couldn't deny that part of me wanted to find a way to bridge that cavernous distance, a way to share pain and perhaps even healing. Tensions hung heavy, wrapping us tighter into their folds as we boarded the ambulance that felt more like a prison than a lifeline. My mother climbed inside first, Mark and I following closely behind, and I could feel the emotional weight pressing down on us like the clouds that continued to roil above. As the doors slammed shut, sealing us in, I caught my father's gaze one last time. The storm outside echoed the turmoil inside, the melody of loss intertwining with the haunting crescendo of hope. Just as the ambulance lurched forward, jolting our lives into the unknown, I suddenly remembered something I hadn't thought of in years. A childhood promise whispered under a lace canopy draped in sunlight. "No matter what happens, we will always come home." But where was home now? As that question reverberated in my mind, the reality of my choices, of my love for Mark, and the shadows of my father loomed in the forefront. The threads of red and blue lights began to blur in my vision, dizzying and disorienting, and soon I realized something would have to give, and a choice would soon be at hand that could alter the very fabric of my existence. We drove into the storm, each heartbeat throbbing louder in the face of impending turbulence, knowing that by the end of this night, everything could change. The fluorescent lights of the hospital pierced through the darkness like daggers, washing the waiting room in cold, clinical sterility. I clutched Mark's hand tightly, grounding myself in his warmth as the world around us swirled in chaos. My mother paced, her worried breaths punctuating the silence, while my father lingered near the entryway, wrestling his demons with every twitch and fidget. The ticking clock on the wall became a metronome for my rising anxiety, counting down the moments as we waited for news about my grandmother. Each tick echoed like a heartbeat in the stillness, reminding me that with every passing second, a choice loomed larger over us, the choice between holding onto the past or stepping tentatively into a future shrouded in uncertainty. "Do you think she'll be okay?" I whispered to Mark, my voice quivering under the weight of my fear. He squeezed my hand, his steadfast gaze warming me. "I believe she will be," he replied, his voice a soothing balm. "She's strong, Sarah. Just like you." His words sparked a tiny flame of hope within me, fighting through the shadows that crowded my heart. Yet, every time I looked at my father, that flame flickered precariously. The memories of laughter and love jostled with sharp reminders of betrayal and absence, and I found myself spiraling into a whirlpool of doubt. Just then, a nurse appeared. Her face a mask of professionalism, but her eyes softer than the pins and needles that had begun dancing through my chest. "Are you family?" she asked, glancing between us. I nodded, feeling a sudden urge to shield the truth. "Yes," I answered, though the weight of that simple word was anything but easy. "She's in surgery now," the nurse explained, her tone laced with both urgency and compassion. "The doctors are doing everything they can. It might take some time." Time, always the cruelest and most precious commodity in situations like these. I turned to my mother, whose face had paled, drained of any sense of hope. "Maybe we should call someone. Family shouldn't face these things alone," I murmured, glancing at my father, who stood apart, an outsider in what should have been a moment of unity. My mother swallowed hard, her eyes glittering with unshed tears. "Do you really think he deserves to be part of this?" she asked, her voice trembling. Her words drove into me like an arrow. I felt the weight of my father's absence pressing, no longer a distant memory, but a tangible reality that threatened to crush me. "I don't know," I admitted, my heart aching. "Booty can't just forget." "Can we fix this, Mom?" At that moment, Mark stepped forward, his expression resolute. "What if we let him in just for tonight?" he suggested, his voice steady as he spoke to my mother. "If it's about her, he deserves to know what happens." "We all do." Something in his delivery cut through the tension, igniting a flicker of agreement within me. It wasn't a solution, but perhaps it was a starting point of solace amidst the turmoil. My mother's eyes darted to my father, and I could see the gears shifting inside her, uncertainty dancing with the echoes of the past. "Fine," she relented, her shoulders slumping in resignation. "But if he pulls another stunt, I'm done." The fierceness of her love for my grandmother radiated, blurring the lines of our complicated relationships. I nodded, grateful yet apprehensive as I turned back to my father. He finally approached us, hesitant yet drawn, the air around him thick with unspoken words. "Do want to be here for her. For you all," he whispered, his voice soft but tremulous. My breath caught in my throat. Did he mean it? Or was this another string of half-hearted promises? "You can't just return and expect it to be fine," I said, unable to mask the bitterness that crept into my tone despite my best efforts. "I know," he replied, his eyes earnest, pleading for understanding, for a chance to make amends. "But I can try, I can be better." Suddenly, the tension erupted, the crescendo of my heartache spilling over. I had always wanted my father to be present, to partake in my life's moments, but as I looked between him and Mark, the reality settled heavily upon me. Trust had to be rebuilt, and the cost of rebuilding was immeasurable. A door swung open, and a doctor stepped out, the gravity of the moment drawing every eye upon him. "I'm afraid we need to talk," he said, his voice firm, encapsulating the gathered emotions in an unsettling hush. My heart raced as I exchanged desperate glances with Mark, my mother, and my father. Our disparate worlds were colliding into one, but would we be able to weather the storm together? Would any choice I made lead us toward a semblance of healing, or were we simply delaying the inevitable? As the doctor gestured for us to follow him into the next room, I felt the churning in my stomach intensify. The moment of truth awaited us, but with it came the whispered fears of what it might reveal. My chest tightened at the thought of losing my grandmother and the pieces of my life that hung delicately in the balance. This wasn't just about her anymore, this was about family, love, forgiveness, and the heart-wrenching uncertainty that could unravel everything we held dear. And within that turmoil, one question hung in the air, heavy and foreboding. What if the choice I made tonight could shatter the fragile web of hope we had just begun to weave? The doctor led us to a small, dimly lit room that felt like the epicenter of our shared fears. The walls were adorned with advanced medical charts, but all my focus narrowed to his face's solemn expression felt like the weight of the world pressing against my chest. "We were able to stabilize her," he began, and for a heartbeat, my breath halted. "But there are complications." His words landed heavily, each syllable crackling in the tense air. "What kind of complications?" My voice wavered, driven by an instinctual need to protect the tiny flicker of hope wanting to burst into flame. The doctor steeled himself, glancing at my parents before fixing his gaze back on me. "We need to prepare you for the possibility of further intervention. Surgeries may be necessary, and her recovery will be long. I cannot promise how she will respond." I could see the way he softened his voice, trying to temper the blow he was delivering. I searched his eyes for reassurance, but all I saw were shadows of uncertainty. "Can't you do anything?" It came out as a plea, a desperate attempt to shake the fear cascading through our family. "She's a fighter," he replied, trying to inject some positivity amidst the dark. "But any progress will take time." Time again, the precious and cruel specter looming over us. A thick silence filled the room, one suffused with pain and the ache of past grievances. I turned to see my mother, her face pale and drawn, while my father fidgeted uncomfortably beside her, the weight of his presence suddenly feeling like a burden, heavy and unmovable. "What are we going to do?" My mother's voice cracked, the facade of her strength crumbling just enough for the terror of impending loss to spill through. "It's not time to make decisions yet," my father interjected, surprising me with a sudden surge of confidence. "We should all just be here, for her and each other." His words received varied responses, skepticism from my mother, slight acknowledgement from Mark. I felt the tension rise again, accusations embedded in the silence. I didn't want to confront the truth, the fact that we were thrust together as a family for her sake, but even as hope flickered in my heart, I could see the vast chasm between us, an unbridgeable gap of memories and hurt. "Listen, I know things aren't perfect," he continued, his voice thickening. "But this isn't just about what's happened before. It's about now, it's about her." He glanced at me, his eyes searching for something solid in the chaos. "We owe it to her to fight together." Despite the soap of resentment coating my thoughts, I couldn't shake the realization that he was right. This wasn't merely about our fractured past, but about the present and the uncertain future that lay ahead. Suddenly, in the murky depths of despair, hope glimmered briefly, a possibility that maybe we could truly unite, just for her. My voice trembled as I tried to voice what I felt. "Maybe you're right," I said, the words tasting bitter yet offering a pathway towards unity. "But we need to be honest. No more secrets." The air thickened with tension as I watched my father's expression change, a flicker of shame passing across his face. I turned to Mark, who gave me a slight nod, his unspoken solidarity bolstering my resolve. Just then, a gentle knock at the door interrupted our brewing storm. A nurse entered, her demeanor radiating kindness as she caught our anxious expressions. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a few options available for you. We can set up a family waiting area where you can stay close, or, if you would like, you can see her briefly as she stabilizes." The offer created a buoy of relief in the chaos that enveloped us. My heart raced at the thought of seeing my grandmother, her frail form cradled beneath stark white sheets. Part of me longed to hold her hand, to assure her that our love was unwavering, even tangled in resentment and frustration. "I want to see her," I found myself saying before I even processed the words. Mark reached for my hand, his fingertips warm against the cold shells of my anxiety. "I'll go with you," he said softly, squeezing reassuringly. Taking a deep breath, I turned to my parents, whose faces mirrored both concern and longing. "Are you coming?" I asked, my voice softening as I extended an olive branch. My mother nodded slowly, while my father swallowed hard. "Yes, I want to be there for her, for you all," he replied, surprising me yet again. Together, we followed the nurse, each step laden with the weight of unspoken words and the gravity of our situation. My chest tightened in anticipation, hoping desperately for comfort, a glimmer of connection in the face of looming tragedy. As we entered the dim room, a serene atmosphere enveloped us, punctuated by the soft, steady beeping of the machines surrounding her. My grandmother lay there, fragile yet somehow still a beacon of love that transcended our fractured family ties. In that moment, a rush of emotion surged through me, sweeping away anger and resentment, if only for a heartbeat. As Mark squeezed my hand tightly, I realized that this was a crossroads, a choice standing before us. But just as I felt the room encased in quiet hope, a sudden alert blinked on the screen beside her, bedrid and alarming, ripping through the silence like a siren's call. I turned to the nurse, confusion painted across my features, desperate for answers. "Stay back," she cried urgently, moving to check the readings, and in a split second, I felt time freeze again around us, a heavy weight pressing down. Panic washed over my family, our tentative bond threatening to unravel. I felt hope fracture as I glanced at my father's face, the shadows of the past crashing into the present like a tidal wave. Was it too late for us? We had taken a first step together, but with hope beginning to unfurl like delicate petals, would it all be crushed before it even bloomed? The beeping machines escalated, a sharp reminder of the fragility of life that threatened to shatter the scarce sense of unity we had achieved moments before. My heart felt as if it were tearing apart, splitting into fragments that echoed my family's past disputes and unhealed wounds. As the nurse hurried to assess my grandmother's vitals, an icy pit formed in my stomach. "What's happening?" I stammered, the raw edge of fear slicing through my heart. "Just a moment," she replied, focused on the monitors, her determination drawing the air taut around us. The way she worked, calm yet urgent, was a reminder of the thin line between life and loss. Each second that passed intensified the knot in my throat, where hope struggled to breathe against rising dread. Is she going to be okay? My mother's voice trembled, echoing the uncertainty that clouded the room. The nurse's hands weren't the only ones trembling then. My father clenched his fists at his sides, visibly wrestling with his own flurry of emotions. For the first time since the doctor had delivered the grim news, I searched his face not for anger or disappointment, but for someone who shared my fear. "Please," I insisted, my voice barely a whisper. "What does this mean?" Just then, the flutter of a reassuring hand fell against my back. Mark's touch, grounding me with its warmth. "Whatever happens, we're together," he murmured fiercely, and for a flicker of a moment, I could feel the semblance of a protective bubble forming around us. But before I had time to respond, another nurse joined the first, and they exchanged serious glances that struck me like a cold wave. "Vital signs are stabilizing," one of them announced, and I sucked in a breath as relief washed over me, momentarily eclipsing my fear. However, that small flicker all too quickly faded when the first nurse met my gaze, her expression stern. "We need to have a family meeting. There are options we must discuss." The words hung heavily in the air, and it felt as if the ground beneath us shifted. "Options?" my father repeated, his brow furrowing in confusion. "Yes, regarding your grandmother's treatment plan moving forward." Before I could catch my breath, Mark's hand left mine, and he moved to my side while my parents began an anxious murmur of speculation. The nurse led us into a small consultation room, more clinical, colder than where we stood moments prior, and my heart raced. As I mentioned, the second nurse continued, pulling out a clipboard and establishing an authority that made my legs tremble. "We need to discuss the possibility of surgery. However, we also have to face the reality that her age and current health status make recovery uncertain." "Surgery?" My voice cracked. But she just stabilized. "Stabilization is not an indication of wellness," the nurse replied gently but firmly. "While the surgery may offer her a chance, it comes with significant risks. I need you to discuss this as a family. What she needs now more than ever is your support, no matter which decision you make." The weight of her words bore down on me, pushing me to the edge of uncertainty. "But what if she doesn't survive the surgery?" I asked, my voice trembling with a new wave of fear. "Not all outcomes are negative," she explained softly, the warmth of her voice a contrast to the chill in the room. "She has a fighting spirit, but it's ultimately your decision." My entire being felt paralyzed as we filled the tiny room with a whirlwind of emotions. It was overwhelming to see the fissures in my parents' relationship laid bare. I sensed an age-old argument igniting beneath the surface, one that had never truly dissipated. "It's what she would want," my father insisted, his tone trembling, desperation coloring his words. "She needs us to support her choices, all of us. What she'd want? Or what you think she'd want?" My mother shot back, her eyes flashing. "You have no idea what that even means." The clash of their voices was unbearable, a haunting echo of so many arguments that had come before it. I swallowed hard against the anxious knot rising in my throat, each sentence spinning us deeper into chaos, further away from clarity. "Stop," I shouted, startling both of them into silence. "This isn't about you anymore. It's about Grandma. If we keep this up, we'll ruin everything again." The quiet that followed was heavy, pregnant with angst and unresolved bitterness. I took a breath, desperate to salvage something from this gathering storm. "We can't let our past errors guide us now. We owe it to her to make the right choice together." Mark stood steadfast beside me, and though I could sense his anxiety reflecting mine, the strength emanating from his presence was a balm. I touched his arm, the gesture grounding me as I searched my parents' faces. "She needs every bit of love we can give her right now," I implored, the reality of our unity dawning on me in that stark moment. We need to decide today, but we must do it together. The tension hung thick in the air, fragile and fraught like a spider's web glistening dew in the dawn. I watched my father's lips press into a thin line, and my mother's breathing stutter against the weight of what was unfolding. Then, as if plucked from the depths of despair, a small glimmer of kindness emerged. The nurse returned, her presence infusing the room with a fresh wave of calm. I understand this is difficult, but if you need to take a moment, we can step out. Collectively, we released the breath that we had all been holding, yet the darkness lingered. Would we seize this sense of unity for Grandma's sake, or would we retreat back into our trenches, succumbing to the bitter arguments of our past? Just as I opened my mouth to propose a direction, a call echoed through the hallway, "Emergency in room 3. The doors swung open and chaos erupted in the sterile corridor, nurses rushing past, and the weight of impending danger crashing over my family's feeble sense of togetherness. My heart raced at the thought of more lives hanging in the balance. But then a familiar figure appeared at the end of the hallway, me Uncle Sam, distraught yet resolute, his eyes flooded with unshed tears. The moment felt heavy with the promise of revelation. "Where is Grandma?" he shouted, and in his voice, I heard the fading remnants of the past tied inexplicably to our current struggles. A mix of dread and hope twisted within me, and as his anxious gaze fell upon me, I felt the burden of the moment bearing down once more. Would this revelation shatter us, or serve as a bittersweet reminder that family, despite its flaws, was still worth fighting for? The storm hung thick in the air, heavy with the weight of our unresolved family quarrels and the urgent need for connection as my uncle rushed toward us. Instinctively, I felt my heart race, uncertainty knotted tightly in my stomach. He wasn't just another face in the storm. He was a reminder of the ties that had been strained over the years, yet also a potential bridge to understanding. "Sam, what's going on?" my father asked, anxiety lacing his voice as he stepped closer, his rigid demeanor softening in the face of family. His eyes darted between us all, desperate for reassurance. "I just got a call. Grams is going into surgery now. They said we needed to decide about the options quickly." He paused, glancing around, as if searching for assurance amidst the clamor. "But I have something to say." Something in his tone, a blend of urgency and hesitation, drew us deeper into the storm brewing within our family. A moment of silence fell over us before he continued. "You all know how much she means to us. We've been through so much, lost the bond that held us together. It's time to let go of the past." His words resonated through my heart, echoing the sentiment that had danced on the tips of my own lips. "What are you saying?" my mother pressed, her voice wavering as she sought clarity amongst the chaos. "She wouldn't want us to fight," he said, his gaze firm yet gentle. "She wants to leave a legacy of love, one that binds us, not breaks us. We need to choose to stand united now. Whatever happens in the surgery, we owe her that much." In that moment, the tension hovering amongst us seemed to dissipate like the rain after a storm, leaving behind only steam and the glimmer of hope. I could feel the truth wrapped tightly around those words, how they tugged on the fraying threads of our love, inviting us to weave them back together. I caught Mark's gaze then, a shared understanding shimmering in the depths of his eyes. He was a steadying presence as I recalled the memories spent with my grandmother, the stories she shared, her laugh echoing like a distant song in my ear. I looked back at my father, who seemed to soften beneath the weight of his own regret, and my mother, whose vigilance cracked just slightly. "It has to be a decision made with love," Sam urged, his voice steadying as it pierced the emotional fog. "We can never go back, but we can honor her memory moving forward. Together." And just like that, the realization washed over. Meth's choice lay not just with the surgery, but within the hearts of the people gathered around me. In the pressing urgency, I felt a shift of acutely personal depth. I had been longing for clarity, a glimmer of connection that would bridge the gap between family and love. "Let's do it together," I whisper, pleading, hopeful. "Let's choose to let her spirit guide us, not just through the storm of her health, but through the storm within our lives. She deserves to know we chose love." There was a long pause, silence echoing against the sterile white walls, dissecting the tension of our history before it slowly fused them together into a single heartbeat. The tears came, blurring my vision, and I looked at my uncle, my father, my mother, and even Mark, and felt an unfamiliar warmth bloom among us. The fear of judgment and disappointment began to dissipate like forgotten shadows, melting from the dawn of forgiveness. I am sorry, my father finally broke, his voice heavy with the realization of all had missed. For everything. My mother stepped closer, her hand resting against my father's shoulder, an acknowledgement that the road ahead needed to be paved with compassion rather than resentment. Us too. We need more than just a family name. We need a family bond, she echoed, voice trembling just enough to break the barriers of silence I had thought were unbreakable. I'm sorry for not being around, Sam added, surprising us all. Time has stolen so much, and I don't want to keep losing us. As they grappled with the weight of regret, I realized how beautifully they were tentative amidst their revelations. A surge of emotion and stillness blanketed the room. A reprieve in the face of reality. Mark stepped forward, voice gentle yet uncomplicated. Let's choose to keep her legacy alive by embracing our imperfect selves. We can only navigate through the storm if we keep love at the forefront, he said, looking at each of us. His steadfast gaze offering a lifeline of hope. It was a powerful moment steeped in vulnerability. The walls around our hearts began to dissolve as they opened up to the power of healing and forgiveness. We had the chance to respect the love she had always embodied, to let it ripple outward and unite us as we mustered our way through this fraught experience. Suddenly, from across the hallway, another voice broke through, steady and resonant. Family? It was a doctor, his presence reframing our perspectives. We're ready for your decision regarding your grandmother's surgery. Before I spoke again, armed with fear and hope, I turned to my family. Together, I said fiercely, my heart swelling with affection for those by my side, those I had held at arm's length for far too long, those tied to my grandmother in ways we couldn't quantify. We choose together, and in that moment, as I grabbed Mark's hand tightly, amid the simmering emotions and the impending storm of uncertainty, I felt a renewed strength pulsating through us all as we stood ready to unite. And, just as the weight lifted, I understood. It was never solely about survival. It was about igniting the spark of love and connection to carry us through the shadows. The surgeon smiled, ushering us forward as we took a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever awaited on the other side, not just as fractured individuals, but as a family, once more tied together by a strong thread of unconditional love forged in the fires of adversity. In the corridors of that stark hospital, I learned that even storms could part, revealing a glimmer of hope. It was far clearer than before. In choosing love over fear and connection over isolation, we began to find our way home, and as we stepped into the unknown, my heart brimmed with an unwavering conviction. Sometimes, it's the choices we make in the storm that illuminate the path back to ourselves, because at the end of the day, family is not merely an obligation, it is a promise we must continually choose to honor.